Tell me if you cannot hear.
We are coming together from many movements across Europe and the global south. And this is a historic moment. That's why we have come together in a spontaneous mobilization, bringing together movements from the global south in 20 countries, because the planet doesn't work planning for August and September.
Tienen que entender que Repsol no le estamos pidiendo dádiva. Repsol tiene que pagar lo que ha agarrado, ha maltratado, ha contaminado. Paga todo lo que ha contaminado y se va de nuestro país, porque no podemos seguir permitiendo que empresas extractivistas, empresas vienen a contaminar, violentan a nuestra madre naturaleza y siguen todavía ganando plata a costa de todos nosotros.
Repsol tiene en Perú un amplio historial de impactos socioecológicos, denuncias de malas prácticas y violaciones de derechos humanos.
Más recientemente en países como Argentina, Ecuador, Perú o Tailandia.
Estamos en el consulado argentino en Barcelona. Recién entregamos al cónsul la nota por un mar libre de petroleras, no al fracking.
Repsol, hazte cargo.
We are in front of the Repsol headquarters here in solidarity with everyone affected by this climate disaster that is happening in Peru.
Wir fordern, dass Repsol und alle anderen Öl-, Gas- und Kohlekonzerne die Verantwortung für ihr Handeln tragen.
Está la marea negra de la comunidad peruana representando el ecocidio con petróleo que ha sucedido en el mar peruano.
So we have applied civil society together with all the groups in South Africa who love the ocean are going to attack and take on Shell and stop Shell.
As a Mambondo indigenous people, that we are very disturbed by what is happening globally in terms of the attack to the ocean.
Last night in Nigeria, a tanker is burning off the coast of Nigeria, spilling 22,000 barrels of oil. We have faced devastating effects of the presence of Shell, Ajib, and Total oil companies in Nogore land. So this is our agitation. I will continue to be on the street until power returns to the people. When people is the power, not politicians is the power, people is the power.
We're here tonight outside the Shell headquarters on the South Bank in the centre of London. It was a victory. It stopped Shell's programme at least for 5 months. It's a battle won. The war continues, the struggle continues against Shell.
We went to the World Bank and tell them that they shouldn't be funding fossil fuel projects.
When you hit them where it hurts most, in their pockets, their bottom lines, their balance sheets, and their dividends, we will hurt them and hurt them and hurt them in the way that they understand, which is finance and money. Your savings, your future, your church, your community do not bank with Standard Bank. As simple as that.
The whole world is aware that you are neocolonial institution.
Todas las costas del mundo, queremos que Equinor, Shell e YPF se vayan de nuestras costas. Necesitamos urgente una transición a energías renovables.
Yo represento la red de apoyo a los pueblos indígenas, pueblo mapuche y a otros pueblos indígenas en Noruega. Pedimos a los parlamentarios noruegos y a la opinión pública noruega que asuma la responsabilidad para evitar el deterioro brutal con la diversidad y el real respeto a la madre tierra.
¡Equinor! ¡Equinor!
That's it. Hope you liked it.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for showing that. And with that, I'd like to welcome everybody.
You're muted, Amanda.
And it sounded so good. I'm sorry you missed it. Okay, with that, thank you so much for that. I'd like to welcome everybody to our webinar to stop climate catastrophe. We must join the fight against neocolonialism. My name is Amanda. I'm joining you from London in the UK, from one of the co-hosting groups, the Americana Solidarity Collective. Our other sister campaign is the Global Coastline Rebellion Network. So what I'd like to do is really quickly introduce our campaign and ask Esteban to do the same for the Global Coastline Rebellion. And then I'll give you a bit of an overview of how the webinar will proceed. Just to let you know, we are recording the events and live streaming over YouTube. So the Marikana Massacre happened on the 16th of August in 2012. The South African police shot dead 34 mine workers who were on strike for a living wage against Lawnmen, a UK-based corporation. The Black community in London initiated continuing protests against this outrage, starting in the days immediately after the massacre. Our collective stems from that and works closely with students and women's organizations. We hold annual commemorations for the murdered miners, their community, their family, and in particular, the women of Marikana who are continuing the struggle. And we'll do so again this coming 16th of August outside of the South African Embassy on the side of Trafalgar Square. So please join us if you can. Please keep in touch with us by following Americana Solidarity Collective UK on Facebook. We support the grassroots organization Sinatemba in Marikana. We support the Amadiba community on the eastern coast of South Africa and its fight to stop another mining corporation. We did support the Amadiba Crisis Committee in their struggle against the Australian mining corporation, MRC, which is also financed from London. And now we support the Amadiba people and all the wild coast communities who are resisting shells, seismic blasting. Since September, we have teamed up with local Extinction Rebellion groups to put a renewed focus on Shell, which has relocated its headquarters to London in order to protect its investors' interests. Our challenge is to dismantle Shell's power to destroy communities in the planet. We say justice for Marikana, long live Sinatemba, no to neo-colonial extractivism, viva the Amapondo people, water is life, to hell with Shell. Esteban?
Thank you very much, Amanda. It's great to be with all of you. Thank you for organizing this anti-colonial solidarity coming together of our struggles. I'm from Argentina. My name is Esteban, and I had to flee my country for fighting some of the multinational companies from Europe that are doing abroad what they are banned from doing at home, such as fracking. We are at the front lines of the climate crisis. We are at the front lines of European corporate power. And I'm afraid it's going to get even worse with this new push for gas coming from the Americas, from fracking, as if that was some kind of solution to get away from Russian gas. And I think we need to push for no gas and a truly renewable future for Europe, actually independence, right? Energy independence for Europe. We recently organized a global campaign that you just saw the video called the Global Coastline Rebellion. And I think this could be an alternative way of how Europe could organize for situations that come up all the time. Every day there is a new crisis around the world at the real front lines of the climate crisis. While European movements are busy planning for September and August and November, the world is burning today. The world is burning today, and the climate crisis has names and locations and addresses one at a time. And I think, you know, it's about time that the climate movement should do what we began doing with the Coastline Rebellion, is just be available to respond. There was a major spill in Peru. We had to respond to that. It was a Spanish multinational company What else on earth is the climate movement doing in Europe that is not tackling that? I think if they could come together, they could really make Repsol pay and then make Repsol get the hell out of Peru because they don't even want to pay for the spill. And as we were building this, we found more and more spills happening in Ecuador, in Thailand, in Nigeria. Argentina was already going through a major mass resistance against offshore drilling. So we just came together with no hierarchies, with no logos. There was a lot of logos, but we came together regardless of whether they were XR or non-XR, Ende Gelände, Fridays. We came together for water, we came together for life. And I think Europe may learn a lot from trying to be a little more flexible and spontaneous because the world does not adjust to European planning ahead of time. Europe needs to adjust to the way the real world is working. Thank you.
Very well said. I'd like to introduce our first panelist. We'll hear more from Esteban a little bit later, but our first speaker will be Nonhle Mubutuma from the Abadiba Crisis Committee. Nonhle?
Yes, thank you so much. I hope you hear me. Yes, my name is Nonhle Mubutuma here in South Africa. I'm representing Abadiba Crisis Committee. Abadiba Crisis Committee is a social movement, it's a community movement. And when the reason we started is because of there was a lot of extractivism that is going on. And also in our community, it's where they discovered the titanium. And we fight that for many reasons, that the land where they want to extract minerals is the land that it feeds us, it's the land for our livelihood. And we said that also beside that, climate change is here, climate change is real. Now we can't promote the fossil fuel. And while we still watching that, we think we managed to fight, although it's not clear if it's going out or it's going in, because since we won in court, but government is playing hide and seek of they are going to appeal, you know, it's on that situation. But after that, we just heard that Shell also, they want to explore oil and gas in our coastal line. Now, it was another shock to us as people that were living on the coast, because we know that once they explore oil and gas in our ocean, ocean is part of us. Ocean is our livelihood. You know, especially on the Wild Coast. The Wild Coast is known of biodiversity, hundreds of different species, and is known of a fishing zone in South Africa. All the fishermen, they used to come to our Wild Coast because of it's a place where you can get quite a lot of fish. And many people are dependent on ocean for survival. Now, if you want to explore oil and gas, what do you think about those people that were dependent on the ocean for survival? Those are the things that we just noticed that our government did not consider. But we understand that the issue here is always you must prioritize the private sector over the communities, because private sector, it makes profit, but communities does not make profit to benefit for the state. That is why they always compromise us. And immediately when we heard that this kind of survey, this seismic survey, they're going to do it, they're going to blast in the ocean. And you can imagine how many animals, how many species that are going to be affected. But our own government, we keep saying that, no, there will be no negative impact that is going to happen. But the question, if there is no negative impact, how can we be sure as a South African citizens? Because there was no environmental authorization where it can keep us that, okay, this, it won't left any negative impact. And we told our own government that we don't trust what you say, because it can't be one department that approves that Shell must start do a blasting, and all that. It was meaningless to our own government. We just been forced to go to court in order to stop Shell, because the government was not even willing to listen to us. And at the most hurtful part, government keeps saying that, no, we did consult communities, but we keep saying that, no, we never been consulted. And we understand why they said they consulted communities, because consultation is part of the law, that any development, any company want to do a development in South Africa, you must consult communities. And communities are not just need only consultation, they also need to give a consent to that company that they are welcoming this development, but they were taking a shortcut. Now, when we go to court and they were interdicted to continue with their survey, Shell was complaining a lot to say that, no, this is so unfair because they lost billions that they were already invested. But the issue here, they must not blame the communities that they lost billions. These billions they are talking about are nothing. They are not worth it, anything than the damage that they're going to do it here. That's what we're saying to Shell. These billions are nothing. The damage Shell was going to do here, you cannot pay and you cannot compensate. That is the thing that Shell did not understand, because here there is species that are living in the coast. There is also a culture here that you cannot compensate. Here we are tradition a community where we believe in it's our beliefs that our ancestors, we know that as African, where they reside in the ocean. Now, if you disturb the ocean, you are not only disturbing the marine animals, you also disturb our spirits. And as African, we go to ocean. Most of us, we do have traditional leaders amongst us. They go inside the ocean and practice initiation to be Isangoma. But I understand that developers, they don't understand that. Also, it's not that they don't understand, they ignore, because they think when they're doing development, culture does not exist. That's also what Shell was arguing in court, that you don't understand that the case can be stopped because of the ancestors. Those things are minor when they think that our ancestors, because they don't understand. And, as they don't understand, but when we go to court with Shell was not even have one marine biologist that back up their story. And on our side as community, we're having more than 10 that they were supporting us, that the damage is going to be done by Shell. It's irreversible. But the very most painful part is that our own government, instead of listening to us, they were mostly against the community. That no, we are acting like a colonialism. We are acting like an apartheid government because we stopped development. And the question, whose development they are talking about? Because we know that oil and gas is not sustainable. And on top of that, oil and gas is going to replace quite a lot of livelihood that most communities that are sustaining themselves. And even if Shell can start to operate oil and gas in our ocean, but there will be many, many, many people who lost their job. Shell cannot bring back those jobs. Instead, it's going to leave our ocean holes, the holes that will never been closed. And beside that, we know that climate change is here. And right now, as we speak, we've been hit by a heat wave. Our ocean here on the Wild Coast, recently the crayfish were just floating out of the sea, thousands and thousands of crayfish. And it tells you that the climate is changed. The ocean is becoming very warm. Now the marine life cannot hold anymore. Instead of taking funding to support environmental issues, a program that we can mitigate the climate change, they are investing a lot of money, lots of funding to a fossil fuel. Those are the things that we are calling to our government, especially as they are coming from Glasgow, from COP26, because they did get funding to mitigate the climate change. But it's clear that that funding was not going to mitigate the climate change, while now our own government is still busy that we need to explore oil. Now it's highly time for our own government that we need to do something that is not going to be harmful to the environment. We can't live like that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lonley. Can I now ask Bertha Akeni to unmute and join us? She's from the All African Women's Group of the Global Women's Strike here in the UK. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Hello, are you hearing me? Hello?
Yes, that's perfect. We can hear you. Sorry, Bertha, we've lost you. It looks like you've been muted. We can't hear you.
I think you're controlling the mute and unmute. It goes off.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. Nice to be around here. Good evening from wherever you are. Good afternoon. My name is Bertha. I'm from All African Women. We are self-help group that campaigns for issues concerning women from all over the world, from all parts of the world. We're here in London, and we campaign against all kinds of things, against asylum, rape, domestic people, violence, environmental issues, wars. So that's what we do. I represent them, and I'm speaking just in line with what Nolly have already told us about. Oh, what's going on here? Sorry, I'm going to be reading from a script. So if you don't mind, I may disappear somehow, but you're going to hear my voice. Is that okay?
That's totally fine.
Okay, yeah. Like I said before, my name is Bertha. I'm from All African Women Group. We're a self-help group. Many of us fled from war, from poverty, domestic violence, and environmental damage. I grew up in South Nigeria in the Delta region, which is a very wealthy in resources. Just like Nole had mentioned, almost everything that she has said there, they are just beginning with them. But ours is a place that have already been degraded so much. Like she said, there is no, if the soil is damaged, the soil is damaged. You cannot repair nature, you cannot. So Nole, you people are doing fantastically well. So what am I saying? Oil and gas exploration is rife in my area, fuel being fled daily. Oil spill causes acid rain, black soot to an extent that if you have a white thing or anything, you just put it, even on your face, you're going to see all dark soot all over. If your car, just try putting something, even if it's a toilet roll, you're going to see everything dark. So pollution is very, very critical in the Delta area and in some other areas where oil and gas is fled. So fish are killed, just like Nole have said. They're killed and the soil is polluted to the roots, such that if you dig the root, yeah, you're going to get the soil, but it's not going to look normal. You're going to see that it's a damaged soil that can never be repaired. And then nothing grows there, nothing. Fishes don't grow. Science have proved this, and the people have proved it in many times, but it has been ignored because of money and because our politicians are engaging with Shell. So Shell has moved from land to drilling, like Nole is trying to point out. Yeah, they are all trying to go to offshore drilling now, where they can do a lot of their damage with nobody, attacking them. So that is what they are planning now, which they are going to do. So people's livelihood are destroyed. People are forced to leave their homes and communities They suffer many health problems, and life continues to be miserable for the Delta people. You saw the Ogonis among those people in coastal, those people that we are campaigning there, that we watched, that clip we watched 5 minutes ago. So hospitals are few. If where you can find them, there is not even a paracetamol. It's just that I cannot put the template. I would have just get a repeated announcement from the wife of the president of Nigeria, Buhari, who announced that despite the billions of money that was poured into the Abuja hospital, the hospital that takes care of the politicians, including the Aso Rock, which is the headquarters, that there is no paracetamol, and that is what is going on. So we can imagine when a headquarters of a government has no paracetamol, what will happen to all the other ones in the local areas that have no road, no adjoining anything, so no equipment. So that is the way it is in the Delta area and in Nigeria. So life expectancy is between 45 to 53 years old. You see, women and children are badly affected because when there is no food, it's the women that goes around searching for, what to eat and what to give to their children. So when women, they look after people when they get sick and disabled, and look after animals and plants, and do most of the farming, the subsistence farming that keeps the local areas. So our communities in the Delta area are the poorest because the wells of oil and gas are stolen by corruption from government and their foreign cronies. Shell British Petroleum have been there since 1953, and I had even beyond. And the longest, I may say, they are the mother or the father of the oil companies in Nigeria. Other oil companies are, Elf Oil from France, Ajib from Italy, Mobil Oil from US, Halliburton from US, Total Oil and ExxonMobil. They are all, there are so many others that are springing up every day. They have gone more far beyond what I have just mentioned. So you see, when they talk about cleanups and restoration promised to the Delta, the ones promised to the Ogoni people, the people that you saw in that clip, is just one part of what, the areas that were degraded so badly, polluted so badly. So they arranged, I think they came to a court, and the court, they had agreed that they are going to replace and heal. But it does not happen. Cleanups and restoration promised, it doesn't happen. And despite after the killing of Ken Saro-Wiwa in 1985, was it 95, sorry, and 9 other Ogoni people that we are campaigning for environmental pollution, more have been killed since then. It's a daily thing. They are killing every day. More have been jailed, tortured by police and security forces. What angers me is that Shell behaves like the communities around the degraded sites are not worthy to live. They do all these things with the local champions and the Nigerian government. Nigerian people have always resisted Shell. Women have led many protests, including in the Delta region and other Nigerian and African countries. My grandmother was part of the long history women that revolted against colonial rule in 1930s, and thousands of rural market women did sit-in and other protests against British rule of courts, administration, taxes, and policing. In the 80s and 90s, women led protests against oil industry. Women in Niger region won some compensation for land grabbed by oil operations and some money for the claims against pollution. Some women won the feeding taps, in their local areas, electricity in the villages. But that did not go forward because there was no maintenance for them, no maintenance. And so they have gone back to square one. In Nigeria today, everywhere, it is the women doing most of the subsistence farming and fishing, but the land is often controlled by men. Women also look over oil company buildings, blocked roads, and they protect naked protests, as you saw in that clips as well. Nigerian women, especially from the Delta areas, have done such campaigns. There were also tax revolts and protests against IMF policies and rule by colonial powers. Since the slave trade, British has brought divisions, divide and rule, poverty and suffering, to a very great magnitude because of the particular rule they call indirect rule, divide and rule. They use people to decolonize others, who cannot speak up. So we are here because we are forced to leave our countries, and then we face a hostile and racist environment here from the government, which is determined to keep us out and to keep all our resources for themselves. We won't allow this to happen. We're fighting the Borders Bill that will prevent any of us getting refugee status and stop us getting public funds to reunite with our precious children left behind when we run away, when we escape from our places. The abuse and neglect of refugees is the same way the climate is neglected and abused. It's a system of an uncaring society. We see the people fleeing bombing and war in Ukraine, and our hearts go out for them because we know how that is. Some of us have experienced that. We also see politicians pretending to care. Yes, we know that when the refugees come from war areas, when they arrive in UK here, they will be living under Borders Bill and hostile environments. We have a right to be here. So much wealth has been stolen from Africa over centuries, right up to today. Generations of us have created wealth for this country, and we are dismissed as beggars and scoundrels. We have rights to claim the wealth. We won't allow them to destroy the earth, the ocean, the land, and our people, because we depend on them. We depend on these things to live. And that is what I have just, that is what I'm saying today, and that is what I have just read to you. Perhaps I did not even say about the awful natural and human degradations without mentioning that community women and young ones are usually locked up in hell on earth police and army detention cells. When they lock them up, the parents, no relations know about them. That is the style that is happening in Nigeria. They are dehumanized in various forms, and they are left in such a way that you could just prefer any other place in the world than staying in your community. That is why you can find our people everywhere, from the North Pole, anywhere they are, because it's far better than staying in their own land that's supposed to be very, very rich. Yeah, you see, oil and gas and every natural resources that is there is turned into wars, into like a curse, is turned into punishment, and people are going, and governments are just doing it with impunity. Individuals are doing it with impunity. Nobody holds anyone for accountable for killings, massive kidnappings going on in the land, and people are dying daily. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bertha. There's so much in there, and thank you for continuing to speak out against the system. You captured so much in there. Thank you for sharing that with us. I'd like to invite Melinda Janke, who's an international environmental lawyer in Guyana and in London, who is currently fighting very similar processes, systems in offshore Guyana with Exxon. Sorry, Melinda.
Thank you very much, Amanda, and greetings everyone. Thanks for joining from this afternoon or evening or morning, depending on where you're from. It's a hard act to follow. We've had 3 fantastic presentations, 3 amazing, wonderful, brilliant messages. And so I feel like I'm going to struggle a little bit. To stop climate catastrophe, we must join the fight against neocolonialism. I think that this is an element that has sometimes been missing from the global discourse. The idea that we can stop climate catastrophe, but yet we don't have to look at the structure that has brought us to the brink of climate catastrophe. And that's where we are. The latest report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change makes it absolutely clear that humans are running out of time. And yet, the level of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere continues to go up. And the decision makers and big oil know that this is dangerous, but they don't care. These people are capitalists. They don't just want money in order to live. They want profit. They want more than they need. And that means taking it away from others who have it. Capitalism literally costs the earth today. But the politicians don't care about the earth, and big oil doesn't care about the earth. They don't even care about their own families. They're destroying the future for their own children, and they don't care, let alone what they're doing to the rest of us in other parts of the world. They take more and more resources to make more and more money, and they take it however they can. In neocolonialism, they use economic, political, cultural, or other pressures to control or to influence these countries, usually former dependencies. And this is the situation in Guyana. Guyana is a former British colony on the north of South America, and it's a carbon sink. Every day, our forests take out of the atmosphere more greenhouse gas than the entire Guyanese population emits. We've protected the climate forever. The Guyanese people have the best climate record in history. These are climate heroes. Everybody needs to cut greenhouse gases and reach net zero, not us. We are already carbon negative, and we're helping the world to breathe. You would think that's a good thing, but no. Enter ExxonMobil and the government of Guyana and their plan to develop 10 billion barrels of oil, 10 billion in a climate emergency. If that oil is burned, it will release more than 4 billion tons of carbon dioxide. That's a carbon bomb. Unless that oil production is stopped, Guyana will go from a life-saving carbon sink to an earth-destroying carbon bomb. How is this possible? Neocolonialism. Yes, Guyana is a sovereign state, but colonialism has given way to new forms of exploitation. In neocolonialism, the last stages of imperialism, Kwame Nkrumah said, the essence of neocolonialism is that the state which is subject to it is in theory independent and has all the outward trappings of international sovereignty. In reality, its economic system and thus its political policy is directed from outside. Oil exploration and production offshore Guyana is a textbook example of neocolonialism. It's good to advocate for climate protection. It's essential to demand protection of the ocean. But if we want to stop climate catastrophe, we also have to stop neocolonialism. ExxonMobil have come to Guyana for oil. They want the oil to make money. In imperialism, the highest form of capitalism, Lenin writes that from 1900 to 1907, Standard Oil, which is Exxon's previous incarnation, paid dividends ranging from 36% to 48%. And that famous dividend is hardwired into Exxon's identity. They need money to pay dividends to their shareholders. Exxon has two partners in Guyana, Hess and the Chinese National Offshore Oil Company. They have a petroleum agreement with the government of Guyana. That agreement is so bad that even the IMF has called it favorable to the oil companies. I would call it abusive and exploitative. Exxon, Hess, and CNOOC take nearly all of Guyana's oil. They don't just get it cheap, they get it for free. They spend money, there is no limit. They spend how much they want. They can rack up billions of dollars and then send the bill to Guyana. The Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis says that by 2025, Guyana will owe ExxonMobil and its partners about $20 billion US, and that will come out of Guyana's oil. Every month, they take 75% of the oil production to cover their costs, and whatever's not covered gets rolled over to the next month and the next month and the next month and the next month until the day that they leave. That leaves the 25%, and they take half of that. So by now, they've got 87.5% of Guyana's oil. Guyana gets what's left, plus a royalty of 2%. The oil companies don't even pay any tax. When the oil production stops, the wells have to be shut down safely, securely, permanently. These wells are 120 miles offshore. The ocean is a mile deep. The oil is actually 2 miles below the seabed. Imagine the pressure that is under. Imagine the danger. Imagine what would happen if there was even the tiniest mistake that led to a well blowout. The maps show that oil could spread across the Caribbean as far as Costa Rica. Shutting down those wells will cost billions of dollars. Exxon is claiming the money now. Will they produce it when it's needed? We know that they're in financial trouble. Exxon was once the biggest company in the world. Now it's smaller than Home Depot. They've been kicked out of the Dow Jones. They've been borrowing money to cover the operating costs. Exxon needs Guyana. Guyana does not need Exxon. It's neocolonialism that demands that Guyana be transformed from a carbon sink to a carbon bomb so that Exxon can survive. Neocolonialism demands that Exxon gets vast profits at the expense of the Guyanese people through this abusive financial deal. But neocolonialism isn't just about corporate capitalism. It has other angles of attack. And one of them is the people who come as the experts to advise us. Enter the World Bank. And some people may have already heard me this, but in my view, the World Bank is not a bank. It's a sort of religious institution founded on the belief that you can have infinite growth on a finite planet. That's insane by any description. The World Bank is set up under international law. International law began with colonialism. International law is the thing that justified conquest, enslavement, and the killing of non-Europeans and the theft of land and natural resources. The World Bank comes out of that system. Across the globe, the World Bank's record is environmental destruction and impoverishment of peoples, all sacrificed at the altar of development to appease the little god of capitalism. Today, the World Bank is involved in directing Guyana, our economic system and political policy towards oil. Now, Guyana committed under the Paris Agreement to go 100% renewable energy if it gets the financing. The World Bank is lending Guyana money to do oil instead of renewable energy. Dollar for dollar, renewable energy is better, but the bank wants Guyana to do gas, and they know it can't work. There's a World Bank study that says there's little or no domestic market for gas in Guyana. The World Bank project brought in lawyers to change Guyana's laws. These were ExxonMobil's lawyers. They boasted that they were also the lawyers the World Bank most often turned to for legal advice. We raised it with David Malpass, the president of the World Bank, got no answer, but the press says that these lawyers withdrew. Now, Exxon could not get away with neocolonialism. You can't get away with neocolonialism unless there are people in country who facilitate it. In How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, Guyana's great revolutionary intellectual Dr. Walter Rodney, He warned about this. He warned about those who manipulate the system and those who are agents or unwitting accomplices of neocolonialism. Who are these people? Well, the government. It was a minister who signed the abusive petroleum agreement. The leader of the opposition stated in Parliament, and I'm quoting, "Our incompetent government trudged in there unprepared and stuck us with a contract that would harm us for decades into the future. They sold our patrimony." This is what he said in Parliament. Now this party is in government. Now they defend Exxon. The people were promised vast wealth. Guyana looks to end up with vast debt. They were promised lots of jobs from oil. There are few jobs, and workers are complaining about ill treatment and discrimination. The drilling, I said, is 120 miles offshore. Can you imagine the noise? Oil drilling kills marine life. There are 2 fields in production. They're dumping chemicals and hot water in the ocean. Can you imagine the impact on marine life? There are massive tankers collecting the oil. The fishermen say the fish have disappeared and they have lost their livelihoods. The government says the problem is not the oil. Instead of protecting the Guyanese people and the Guyanese environment, we are seeing the same story in Guyana as we've heard of across the globe, where the government prefers to protect big oil. And in Dr. Rodney's terminology, these politicians are representatives of metropolitan imperialist interests. If you're in Guyana and you're a nurse, you're a policeman, a soldier, a fireman, the government pays you a low wage. These are people who risk their lives to protect others. And yet, the government makes them pay tax on the little bit of money that they earn. But Exxon and Hess and CNOOC do not pay any tax. They exploit Guyana and they are rewarded with tax-free system, tax-free status. Going back to Kwame Nkrumah, neocolonialism is also the worst form of imperialism. For those who practice it, it means power without responsibility. And for those who suffer from it, it means exploitation without redress. But people in Guyana are fighting back. There have been 5 court cases challenging oil production in Guyana. One case challenges the petroleum production license, and that's in the Court of Appeal. A second case cut Exxon's environmental permits down to 5 years. The first permit runs out on the 31st of May 2022, in a few weeks' time, and not in December 2040, as originally granted. Another case challenges the flaring. Exxon has flared billions of cubic feet of gas. They're reported in the press as saying they have to flare because their equipment is faulty, and 3 courageous women have gone to court to challenge that flaring. Another case challenges the entire production. The claimants say the oil production causes climate change and therefore oil production is incompatible with the right to a healthy environment. This is the biggest climate change case in the world. At stake, 4 billion tons of carbon dioxide, or roughly 1% of the remaining global carbon budget. And this case is brought by a university dean and an indigenous Wapichan youth from the south of Guyana. And a 5th case challenges aspects of the abusive petroleum agreement. People are using the power of law to stand up for themselves against neocolonial exploitation and educating one another. Last month, Guyana held its first oil conference, and there was a public education awareness campaign in the press and social media every single day of the conference. The head of ExxonMobil was in Guyana, so the Guyanese people demanded answers from him. In a full-page ad, they said, "Mr. Woods, according to the ExxonMobil proxy statement 2021, you got paid $15,639.61, roughly 2,000 times more than the average salary of Guyanese nurses, teachers, police officers who fight to protect and save lives." And they asked this question, "Mr. Woods, do you agree this is unfair and unjust?" But there was no answer. And people also said in the ads in the press, "Mr. Woods, what would you say to your great-grandchild if she came from the future and asked you why you didn't do more to stop the destruction of life on Earth and why you did the opposite instead and worked for an industry that was directly responsible for destroying the only habitable planet we have. Again, there's no answer. And so people in Guyana have demanded a moratorium, and I will share the link with that in a moment. Air, water, land, plants, animals, that's our life. Oil, gas, petrochemicals, greenhouse gas, death. Big oil is prepared to destroy the earth. Either we survive or the fossil fuel sector survives. It's one or the other. And that's why, to stop climate catastrophe, we have to look at the deep structure that allows big oil to function and stop neocolonialism. Peru, Argentina, Nigeria, South Africa, the global Coastline Rebellion. We stand together. One earth, one ocean, one atmosphere, but also one fight. We are all in this together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melinda. Last but not least, we return to Esteban Servat from Global Coastline Rebellion, Argentina. Thank you.
Yes, Melinda, we are together. And I could not agree more with everything Melinda just said. I would love to get in touch with you. I'll write my number there in case you have the time to chat, because what we're hearing from Melinda and also from the other speakers, I could not agree more with all of you. And I just keep thinking and banging my head against the wall of what do we do? What do we do about all of this that actually gives us a chance? We are all, I believe, overwhelmed to realize that the climate crisis, at any chance at stopping it, is really slipping between our fingers as the corporate power runs away to perpetrate their profits until the end of time. As Melinda said at the end, they are bent on destroying the planet. You know, we have to assume, we have to take the enemy for, we need to name and point to the enemy that we have. We didn't choose an enemy, but the enemy chose us. The fossil fuel companies are waging war on humanity, and they're waging war on life and on the planet. And unless we can all agree on that, we are getting nowhere. Unless we understand the real power structures behind all of these ecocides and all of the things we are discussing, we are getting nowhere, because we don't even know where to hit them. And I really salute and celebrate that we are doing so many actions against corporations. You guys are doing actions against Shell. We, during the Global Coastline Rebellion, it was all about targeting the corporations, targeting Repsol, Shell, Equinor, BP, Wintershall, and so on. We are trying to shift the discourse and the narrative of the climate movement in Europe, which is where the power really lies. Because think about it, what other place in the world has the power to do this kind of environmental activism without dying? To do civil disobedience without being jailed or tortured or disappeared. Try to do it in China, try to do it in Russia, try to do it in Latin America or in Africa. We have some of the highest murder rates in the world for environmental activists. Just a week or two ago, 2 anti-fracking comrades from Colombia were assassinated. And another one had to flee into exile and is currently in France. And the rest that remain there are under heavy death threats, having to hide, having to need guards that are designated by the very government that is trying to kill them. So the cost of defending the planet in the global south at the front lines is extremely high, and our impact is extremely low. We are invisible. Nothing that happens in the global south usually makes it even into the media of the global north. But here in Europe, you have a lot of white movements, and I call them white because they, it's well known that they're criticized for being too white, right? Like XR, Fridays, Gelände, and so on. But they have a lot of impact. They have a lot of power compared to us. It's still nowhere enough as we need to have as impact, but it's more than anywhere else. Even in the global north, in North America, like the US, where the restrictions and the repression is so harsh that they have made it a felony to block what they call critical infrastructure. There is a girl, an activist, Jessica Resnicek, who was actually even a Christian activist. You could not blame her of being violent or anything like that. All she did was block a pipeline. And now she was sentenced to 8 years in jail, labeled a terrorist for and as a felony for blocking a pipeline. So what I mean to say is that we need to put the privilege of Europe to use. Use your privilege and use it to help support and amplify the fight against your companies. We were talking, Melinda was talking about Exxon, an American company, and then we know all about Shell, BP, Total, Repsol, Equinor, Wintershall, OMV, and so on and so forth, Eni from Italy, and so on. So all of these major Western countries that are developed economies also have leading climate criminals that are truly the power behind the throne. So what I was saying earlier as an introduction about the Coastline Rebellion is we are trying to do actions where the Global South is leading the way. Global South championed actions where the Global North can join in support. And the Coastline Rebellion was not the first one, but it was a great example of that. But we've been doing actions on and on, like last year for World Water Day, actions also against fracking and gas and so on. And always the same, we organize this with the groups from the front lines of the Global South in Latin America and Africa mostly. And then we try to call for the other groups to join in Europe, where the centers of power are, and also where many of these companies that are responsible for this destruction are actually headquartered. And so this is a very powerful way of connecting the dots. And I also found it to be a very powerful unifying strategy, because when you have a global campaign that is led by the Global South, we don't need the Global North to lead us anywhere. The Global North is leading us to destruction. The Global North is the problem. The Global North is the source where all the problems have come from, and this very rotten and destructive system that we're trying to emancipate from. So it's about time that the Global North has the humility to listen. And I am surprised because in Europe, everyone seems to know the best way out, and everyone is an intellectual, and everyone has all these books, and everyone has all these theories, and it seems to me like they think that they can decide the future of the world from a cafe in Berlin, where I'm based right now, or in London. And these are activists with the best of intentions, but sometimes the answer is not just intellectual. This is a challenge to our humanity. Not only, and I'm a scientist, and this is not a scientific problem alone. This is a challenge to our hearts, to our humanity. And if only Europe could have the humility to recognize that is not going to be the source of all the solutions, but actually start listening, the people of the Global South really know what needs to be done. Because as I said at the beginning, the climate crisis has names and addresses. It's not happening in the abstract. The solutions are happening in the abstract in Europe, but the problems are happening in real time, in real places, and they have solutions if only Europe could really mobilize behind those calls to action against Exxon in Guyana, against Shell, BP, and so on in Vaca Muerta, and in South Africa, and against Recon Africa in Namibia that is trying to frack the Okavango Basin and so on. So what we need to do, and I would like to use this opportunity with this panel where I think I am in a way preaching to the choir. I know that probably most of you kind of think along these lines already, but to help us amplify that is not an easy challenge. And if you ask me, the hardest thing of all is to have the humility to actually be led, or let the Global South lead the way. You have a lot to offer from Europe, from the Global North, a lot to offer, but the most important thing you can offer is just not only passing the mic, but passing the leadership. And we know what needs to be done. And I think the Coastline Rebellion was a good example, and we need to do more. So now water is trading in Wall Street. I'm sure all of you know this. Water, December of 2020, started to trade in Wall Street as a commodity. And all of my time in Europe for the last couple of years, I've been telling people, and most people I meet, they still don't have a clue about that. How is it possible? What is the climate movement doing that doesn't know that the most important resource in the world that was declared a human right by the UN over a decade ago is a commodity trading in Wall Street now? What is the climate doing in Europe, where I arrived in Germany almost 3 years ago and started telling people that their biggest oil and gas company, Wintershall, is a leading corporation fracking Argentina in Vaca Muerta. And guess what? Even the climate movement, most people did not even know the name of that company. What is a climate movement doing that does not even know the name of their largest oil and gas climate criminals? So all I'm saying is an appeal to shift the focus. We need to shift our focus from abstract demands, fight for 1.5, tell the truth, and all these things. Of course, we all agree with that, but that doesn't have anything concrete. And as long as we just continue talking about things that are abstract, we're getting nowhere. And we need to talk about things that are concrete. We need Shell to get out of Vaca Muerta, out of the tar sands, Exxon out of Guyana, Repsol out of Peru after they pay for what they did. And we could do that if we break the climate crisis into achievable goals. We need to look at things strategically and break it down into milestones where we could be stronger together against the small version of them, a small unit of Shell, like Shell in the tar sands, Shell in Vaca Muerta, Okavango, Recon Africa and Okavango. We could defeat them if we came together in large enough numbers, and that's what we're trying to do. And we're coming together again for World Water Day. This March 22nd is World Water Day, and is largely used as a greenwashing event by the UN that, after declaring water a human right 10 years ago, has nothing to say about water being commodified. And the water crisis is the biggest part of the climate crisis. So this is going to lead to millions, hundreds of millions of climate refugees in the coming decades, and it's already affecting, I'm sure, most of the frontliners that are here today in this call. And yet last year it was extremely difficult to get Europe to mobilize about water because they just didn't get it. So now we're trying to do it again. As Andy said, we had a great call yesterday. We managed to have a trilingual call every Friday now. Everyone is invited, so we can speak in French, Spanish, and English all together as equals, with a lot of help from great translators, so we can weave common narratives, target the criminals that are polluting, battling the water, contaminating the water, and so on. And the last thing that I want to add is to go to the heart of the problem. Melinda was talking a lot about colonialism and all of the things that are behind all of what's happening. And you know that behind all of these things, she also mentioned the World Bank, the IMF, the financial institutions that rule the world and have our countries of the global south in what is known as the debt trap diplomacy, debt trap colonialism, which they also use to strangle us, our governments, financially and politically, to further expand the colonial plundering of natural resources for their own benefit. Well, in response to that, and this is another campaign and I want to share it with you, and it's not going to answer everyone's wishes and everyone's problems, but we are starting from the global south again, a mobilization from the workers' unions against the debt, against the IMF, against the World Bank. Argentina is an emblematic example because we have the largest debt ever awarded by the IMF in its history. It's illegal, it's unconstitutional. They broke their own statute to give this $44 billion to Argentina. They were trying to help the right-wing President Macri win the re-election. So everything is extremely flawed and illegitimate, and it's really strangling our country. And now the new government, which is supposed to be progressive, is actually making a deal with the IMF to get more loans to just pay back the other loan. Totally insane. So we came up with this campaign for a climate debt swap, which means that if we can mobilize from the worker unions from Argentina and South Africa, that's where it's beginning, but many more in the future, and make pressure on the streets by the millions of people with the organization and capacity of the worker unions that are by far more organized and and forged in these struggles than the climate movement to date. And then to mobilize in the global north, the climate movement against the IMF, against the G7. The G7 is meeting in Germany at the end of June, and we want to call for a global action of international pressure on the IMF and all the governments so that we can make the contracts to be renegotiated and make all of these billions and trillions of dollars of debt be used to leave the fossil fuels underground. You know, Melinda was also saying, you know, with Guyana is actually absorbing carbon. You know, Ecuador 10 years ago also asked to leave the fossil fuels underground and have the global north pay for that. Somebody has to pay for that, and the global south cannot afford to pay for that. So they need to extract more and more and more, like is the case that they're allowing this in Guyana. But the reality is that somebody should be paying Guyana for keeping the fossil fuels underground, for all the carbon that they are absorbing. And the global north is not willing to do that. That's why Exxon is going there. That's why the corporations are getting their way. What if we can build a global mass movement with millions on the streets where we call for the cancellation of these debts and for that money to be used for leaving the fossil fuels underground? You get me? So Argentina gets 44 billion debt relief in exchange for signing a contract to leave an equivalent amount of money of oil and gas underground, and maybe use some part of that to invest in a just transition. So this is something that we're pushing forward. It's also Global South left, and we're also working with the people of the Debt Jubilee from the UK and other groups. And I want to invite all of you, and I will put my number in the chat, because I think that it's a great opportunity to connect social justice and climate justice, and we need to connect the labor movement with the climate movement. Thank you.
Amazing. And we remember Argentinians chucking out 5 governments in a single week in December in 2002. And so if any country can get that unity for life between the trade union movement and the environmental movement, it's going to be you guys, and we need to follow your lead. I also want to note that we've got, and this is something that Melinda said a few weeks ago, we've got countries that are in different stages of destruction from neocolonial environmental exploitation, extractivism. Can you imagine if the British people and trade unions had fought as hard as they could against what was happening in Nigeria when it was happening 50 years ago, 70 years ago, instead of just reacting when something, when women and the Ogoni people were at the point of desperation and being murdered. That's where we are now. And this international, we have to up our game. I really do honor all of your calls to that standard that you're setting for us. Okay, so with that, we're going to stop recording and we're going to stop the live stream. There we go. I'm going to invite everybody to put on their cameras if you're comfortable, and to really, we'd love to have a conversation.